Before we can become whole, we must first meet what we've spent a lifetime avoiding. Not in the outside world, but within. In this video, you will journey into the depths of your psyche, where the forgotten, the feared, and the repressed still live. You'll discover that the shadow is not your enemy, but the gatekeeper of your true power. And that only by turning toward the darkness can you ever hope to find the self. There is a place within you that you've avoided your entire life. A door at the end of a long, dim hallway. You pass by it every day, when you smile to keep others comfortable. When you laugh, to silence the scream inside your chest. When you say you're fine, and don't even believe it yourself, that door leads to everything you've buried. Every rage unexpressed, every truth denied, every instinct repressed in the name of being loved. And yet behind that door is also the key to everything you're searching for. You want peace, purpose, power. You won't find it in the light. You'll find it where you least want to look in the dark. The ancient alchemists knew this. They called it the nigredo, the blackening, the descent into chaos before rebirth. Carl Jung saw it not as metaphor, but as psychological necessity. To become whole, you must shatter. To find yourself, you must first face the parts of you you've hidden, hated, and disowned. This is the work of the shadow, not the cartoon villain in your mind, but the unmet parts of your own soul. It is your rejected anger, your suppressed sexuality, your unspoken fears. It is the you that was exiled when you learned it wasn't safe to be all of you. Every person walks around with a mask. Jung called it the persona, the social face we wear to survive. We craft it carefully. The polite daughter, the strong man, the spiritual one, the achiever. But the more perfect the mask, the more exiled the shadow becomes, and the more disconnected we feel. Because beneath the mask lives something ancient, something raw. The instinctual self, the wild self, the self that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. This self does not speak in words. It speaks in symbols, in dreams, in sudden rage and irrational fears. It slips into your life in the form of projection when you despise something in another that is really just a mirror for what you have not yet accepted in yourself. The shadow is not evil. It is simply unloved. And what is unloved becomes monstrous. Not because it is monstrous by nature, but because anything left in darkness twists in the silence. You do not heal by cutting away the shadow. You heal by seeing it, by acknowledging the rawness, the grief, the violence, the yearning. By sitting with it, not as a judge, but as a witness. This is the moment of descent. The moment when the hero stops running from the dragon and begins to understand that the dragon is guarding the very treasure they seek. This is not work for the faint of heart. To face your shadow is to enter a sacred underworld. It is a death not of your body, but of your illusion. The illusion that you are only what is acceptable, that you are only what the world loves. In the descent, your ego begins to crack, and through those cracks, the self begins to shine. Not the self you perform, but the self that watches quietly from behind your thoughts, the self that knows, the self that has never been lost, only forgotten. The unconscious is not a junk drawer of the psyche. It is a temple, a vast symbolic landscape where every archetype lives. The mother, the father, the child, the wise old man, the trickster, the hero, the shadow. These are not just characters in myth. They are inner forces, psychological organs of the soul. And each one waits within you, playing out in your dreams, your fantasies, your obsessions. To ignore them is to be ruled by them unconsciously. But to see them, to learn their language, is to begin the process of inner alchemy, of transforming what was once chaotic into something whole. Dreams are not nonsense. They are encrypted messages from the unconscious, cloaked in metaphor, encoded in symbol. When you begin to decode them, you begin to enter into conversation with the deeper parts of your psyche. You begin to see that every monster in the dream is a part of you crying to be seen. Every falling elevator, every dark forest, every forgotten child is a key. But keys only work if you dare to turn them. And turning them means listening. It means dropping beneath the noise of your mind and hearing the subtle whispers of your soul. The anima and animus, the feminine and masculine within, are not about gender. They are about polarity. Yin and yang, feeling and logic, intuition and direction. Most of us have exiled one or the other. The man cut off from his anima becomes cold, mechanical, unable to feel. The woman divorced from her animus becomes lost, ungrounded, afraid to move forward. But when these inner figures are honored and integrated, they become guides. The anima becomes the inner muse, the source of feeling beauty and connection to soul. The animus becomes the sword of clarity, the voice that says, "I will not abandon myself again." When these two are in sacred union, you do not just feel complete. You become magnetic. You become sovereign. You become dangerous in the most beautiful way. Individuation is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. It is the sacred marriage of opposites within. It is the realization that light without darkness is blind, and darkness without light is lost. To individuate is to drop the performance to confront the shadow, to follow the thread of your symbols into the deepest forest of the soul, and to return with fire. The fire of knowing who you are, beyond conditioning, beyond personae, beyond fear. This is the hero's journey, not toward some mountaintop, but inward toward the self. And here is the paradox. The deeper you go into yourself, the more universal you become. The more you touch your own wounds, the more compassion you feel for the world, because you begin to see that every person is walking around with their own forgotten child, their own repressed rage, their own unbearable grief. You stop needing to dominate or impress. You start listening. You start loving, not as a performance, but as a natural outpouring of someone who has made peace with their own chaos. This is not a quick journey. There is no shortcut to wholeness. You will walk through fire. You will want to run. But on the other side of the fire is the self, not the one you imagine. The one you forgot, the one that has always been there, waiting. Not in the heavens, not in the applause, but in the silence, in the dark, in the shadow. And now, finally, you are ready to knock on that door, and this time, you will not walk away. The power of silence. In a noisy world, there is a kind of silence that is not empty, but full. A silence that does not retreat, but commands. In a world drunk on noise, opinions, and constant affirmation, silence has become an act of rebellion. We live in a time where speaking louder is mistaken for being right, where to be seen, we must perform, and to be heard, we must shout. But beneath the roar of this modern life, something ancient still whispers, an intelligence older than words. This is the power of silence, not as absence, but as presence. Not as void, but as space that holds the soul. The silence that remains when all masks have been stripped away, when the ego has exhausted itself with explanations and only the self remains watching. Carl Jung once said, "The more compulsive the noise, the deeper the silence it tries to bury." The outer chaos we endure is often a mirror for the inner unrest we refuse to face. The scroll of the feed, the endless chatter, the need to respond, react, correct. All of it is a diversion from the void within. But that void is sacred. It is the womb of transformation. Silence is not comfortable because it confronts us. When all distractions fall away, we are left face to face with the parts of ourselves we have long ignored. The fears that surface in silence are not the enemy. They are the doorway. Most people are terrified of silence because it reveals what they are not ready to see. And yet, it is only in silence that truth begins to speak. Jung understood this deeply. The unconscious does not communicate through debate or argument. It speaks in symbols, in images, in dreams, and in silence. The conscious mind demands to be heard, but the unconscious waits. It speaks when we are quiet enough to listen. In silence, the archetypes stir, the shadow awakens, the self whispers, and if you are still long enough, it begins to guide. There is a warrior's discipline to true silence. It is not passive, it is not submissive. It is charged with awareness, it is a sword sheathed. The silence of the individual who has confronted their own chaos and no longer needs to react to the world around them. There is strength in the one who can hold their ground without raising their voice, who can witness without collapsing, who can remain present in the storm. This is not weakness, it is mastery. To be unprovoked is to be untouchable. The loudest person in the room often reveals their insecurity, but the one who watches quietly often holds the greatest power. The hero's journey does not begin in the noise of the world. It begins in the silence of the soul. The call is rarely loud, it arrives as a whisper, a dream, a discomfort in the middle of the night. But most never hear it because they are too busy listening to everything else. When you begin to tune out the world, something within starts to awaken. You start to remember, not with your mind, but with your being. Silence becomes the space where the unconscious emerges. It becomes the mirror where the ego dissolves and the deeper self steps forward. This is not the silence of repression. It is the silence of revelation. There is a kind of silence that comes after the storm. Not relief, but clarity. The silence where you realize that most of your life has been lived in reaction, that your words were often not your own, but defenses, that your beliefs were inherited, not chosen. In that moment, silence becomes a sanctuary, a sacred pause where you begin to disentangle who you are from who you were told to be. This is where individuation begins, not in noise, but in stillness, when you stop trying to be anything and begin simply to be. To walk the path of individuation is to embrace solitude, not loneliness, but sacred aloneness. The type of silence that births insight, it is in the desert, not the crowd that prophets emerge, in the cave, not the pulpit that truth is revealed. Jung withdrew from the world not to escape it, but to meet it more truthfully. He built his tower by the lake to listen not to others, but to the depths. And in that silence, he encountered the figures of his own soul. The wise old man, the anima, the shadow, the self. They came not as thoughts, but as presences. And so they come to us when we are finally ready to be still. The alchemists knew the value of silence. Their sacred work was done not in the laboratory of the world, but in the inner sanctum of the psyche. There, through contemplation and silence, they transmuted lead into gold. Not literally, but psychologically. The lead was the unconscious, the shadow, the unformed chaos. The gold was the self-integrated whole divine. This transmutation does not happen through effort alone. It happens through awareness, through the quiet gaze turned inward, through the willingness to remain in silence until the soul begins to speak. Every great transformation begins with silence. Before the phoenix rises, there is ash. Before the butterfly emerges, there is the stillness of the cocoon. Before the self reveals itself, there is the death of noise. In silence we descend, we shed, we dissolve. But this is not an end. It is a return to essence, to the original pulse beneath all the layers, the voice before the voices, the knowing before the thoughts. And so in a world that worships volume, you must become the one who listens. In a world that rewards performance, you must reclaim your stillness. Let others rush to speak, to post, to argue. You will remain. You will breathe. You will observe. And in that observation, you will know. The self does not shout. It does not plead for attention. It simply is. When you stop trying to find it through noise, you realize it was never absent, only obscured. Let your silence become your sanctuary. Let it become the temple where you meet your soul. And from that temple, you will walk differently in the world. Not louder, not prouder, but deeper. With presence, with truth. With the kind of quiet that changes everything it touches. This is the power of silence in a noisy world. And it begins with you turning inward and remembering what the world has made you forget. That everything you seek is waiting not out there, but in the stillness within. Why you feel lost and how to return. You are not broken, you are simply far from home. And I do not mean the home made of walls and windows, but the home that lives beneath your skin. The one you left behind long ago without even knowing it. Most people do. We are born whole but raised to forget. Raised to become acceptable, successful, normal. Raised to abandon the wildness that once burned in our eyes. And somewhere along the way, something in us fades, a voice goes quiet, a light dim, and though everything looks fine on the outside, inside we begin to drift. We wake up one day and feel the heaviness of a question we cannot name. We chase careers, lovers, pleasure, validation. But none of it reaches that ache in our chest. That ache is not failure. It is the compass of the soul pointing toward what has been lost. Jung called it the lost connection to the self, the center of the psyche, the source of our deepest truth. When we lose it, we wander, not because we lack direction, but because we've been walking in circles around someone. We've forgotten how to meet ourselves. The self is not the same as the ego. The ego wants control, recognition, safety. The self wants wholeness. And wholeness is not found by becoming better. It is found by becoming real. To feel lost is to feel the distance between your persona, the mask you wear, and the truth of what lies underneath. You are not meant to be a mask. But this world rewards performance. From the first moment you are praised for being quiet, obedient, productive, kind. You begin to craft an identity that fits the mold. You learn what parts of you are lovable and what parts must be hidden. You become a character in someone else's story. And the longer you play that role, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before the script was handed to you. But the self remembers. The unconscious never forgets. It waits patiently beneath the surface, sending signals through dreams, through anxiety, through longing. And when the signals are ignored, they become symptoms. Depression is not always a dysfunction. Sometimes it is the soul refusing to keep pretending. We fear the unknown. But the true fear is not the darkness outside. It is the darkness within. The parts of ourselves we have never dared to meet. Jung called this the shadow. Everything within us that we reject, denounce, or cannot see. And the longer we repress it, the more power it gains. Not as punishment, but as invitation. To feel lost is often to be standing at the edge of that shadow, sensing that there is more to us than we've allowed ourselves to become. But the path inward is not lit by logic. It is guided by symbols, by instinct, by dreams. The language of the unconscious is poetic, not linear. It does not explain. It reveals. You may dream of falling, of being chased, of forgotten rooms, in a house you thought you knew. These are not random. They are the psyche's way of saying something has been left behind. And the dream is not meant to scare you. It is meant to wake you. There is treasure buried in the dark, but you must be willing to leave the surface. This is the beginning of inner work, not self-improvement, but self-encounter, the journey that myths call the descent, where the hero leaves the known world and enters the underworld, not to escape life, but to reclaim the soul. You will not find the self in achievements. You will not find it in applause. You will find it in silence, in stillness, in solitude. Jung withdrew into himself, not out of fear, but necessity. He built his tower at Bollingen, not as a retreat, but as a return. There, far from the noise, he began to listen, not to theories, but to symbols. He painted his dreams. He dialogued with inner figures. He gave form to the unconscious. And what he found was not chaos, it was meaning. Meaning that could not be taught, only lived. The process of individuation is the return home, not to what you were told to be, but to who you truly are. It is the reconciliation of opposites, the persona and the shadow, the ego and the self, the conscious and the unconscious. It is not the path of the many. It is the path of the few, not because it is exclusive, but because it requires courage. To turn inward is to confront the exile within. The child you abandoned, the artist you silenced, the truth you buried. But when you begin to walk that path, strange things start to happen. The world becomes symbolic. You see signs in the ordinary. Dreams become messages. Synchronicities appear. Not because the world has changed, but because your perception has. The outer world begins to mirror your inner reality. And in that mirror, you begin to recognize yourself. To feel lost is a sacred sign. It means the old way is no longer working. It means the soul is waking up. It means you are being called not to fix yourself, but to remember yourself. This is not about becoming new. It is about becoming whole. Wholeness includes the mess, the rage, the grief, the longing, the wildness, the grace. It is all part of you. The moment you stop trying to eliminate your darkness and begin to integrate it, you step into your power. Real power does not come from control. It comes from alignment. From living in accordance with your inner truth, even if the world does not understand it. There is a part of you that has never been lost. It has watched silently through all your mistakes, your victories, your heartbreaks. It is the witness behind your eyes, the still point in the chaos. The self is not found by seeking, it is uncovered by shedding. And each time you let go of who you're not, you come closer to who you are. You don't need to add more. You need to unlearn the noise that has kept you from hearing the voice within. And that voice is waiting. It always has been beneath the persona, beneath the pain, beneath the story you've told yourself about being broken. You are not broken. You are on a journey. And like all great journeys, it begins with a question. Not a question to be answered with words, but with presence. Who am I when no one is watching? Who am I beneath the performance? Who am I when I no longer try to be anything? You are not lost. You are on the path back. Back to your essence. Back to the source. Back to the self. And the first step is to stop running, to be still, to listen, and to trust that the ache in your heart is not the end. It is the beginning. The truth about your inner enemy. There is an enemy that walks with you always. It has no face, yet you know it. It has no voice yet. It speaks in every doubt, every hesitation, every moment you look in the mirror and cannot meet your own eyes. You think this enemy lives outside of you, in the people who misunderstand you, in the failures you fear, in the chaos of the world. But the truth is harder. The truth is that your greatest enemy is the one who knows you best, the one who watches you from within, the one who wears your voice and your memories like armor. This enemy is not here to destroy you. It exists because you have split yourself in two. And the war within is the shadow of that fracture. Carl Jung called this enemy the shadow, but not in the sense of evil or corruption. Not as something to be vanquished, but something to be understood. The shadow is everything you have exiled to survive. Every desire you were told was too much. Every fear you were told to hide. Every power you were taught to shrink. Over time, these pieces form another self, one made of silence, rage, repression, and truth. It waits in the dark corners of your unconscious, not as a threat, but as a demand to be seen. You may hear its whisper in your self-sabotage, in the relationships you destroy before they can hurt you, in the anger you direct inward because it was never safe to direct it outward. You may feel it when you succeed and still feel empty, when you are loved and still feel unworthy, when you are praised and still feel like a fraud. The enemy is not a monster, it is a mirror, and every time you run from it, it grows stronger, not out of malice, but out of need. The parts of you that have been abandoned do not disappear. They wait, and eventually they come knocking. This is why the enemy feels so familiar. Because it is you. It is the you that was not allowed to exist. The you that was shamed, rejected, or ignored until it became silent. But silence is not surrender. It is a seed. And in that seed lies the potential for power or destruction. It all depends on whether you confront it or continue to pretend it isn't there. Jung wrote that what you do not make conscious will manifest as fate. The enemy within is not here to punish you. It is here to wake you. We grow up learning how to split to be loved. We learn to disown what does not fit. The sensitive child becomes the stoic adult. The wild child becomes the obedient worker. The passionate soul becomes the polite smile. And the more we fragment, the more disconnected we feel. Until one day we do not recognize ourselves. We feel lost, anxious, afraid. We search for meaning in distractions, in status, in substances, in endless striving. But what we are really searching for is ourselves, the self we left behind when we chose safety over truth. The shadow is not dangerous because it is dark. It is dangerous because it is unloved. Anything unloved becomes distorted. The more we deny it, the more it manipulates us from the background. You may think you are making choices freely, but until you confront the parts of you that are hidden, you are being driven by what you cannot see. This is why the shadow often appears in dreams as the pursuer, the monster, the trickster. It shows up in projection, in the people you hate or envy, in the stories you obsess over, in the fears that repeat. The shadow does not care how you feel about it. It only wants one thing: integration. To confront the inner enemy is not to fight it. It is to meet it, to listen, to understand its story. Every time you feel threatened by your own emotions, pause. Ask, whose voice is this? Whose values am I trying to uphold? Who told me I was not allowed to feel this? The answers will not come from the mind, but from the body, from the tension in your chest, the tightness in your throat, the dreams that haunt you, the images that won't let go. The unconscious speaks in symbols, not logic, and your enemy lives there, waiting for your attention. The myth of the hero always includes a descent into the underworld, into the cave, into the belly of the whale. Why? Because the treasure is never guarded by angels, it is guarded by monsters. And those monsters are not external forces, they are the parts of us we fear the most. The truth is that no one is coming to save you from your shadow. No one can. It is your work, your battle, your redemption. But you are not alone. Every mystic, every prophet, every awakened soul has walked this path. They did not become wise by avoiding the enemy. They became wise by turning toward it and seeing their own reflection. Jung taught that individuation, the path to psychological wholeness, requires the integration of the shadow. This means allowing the full spectrum of your being to exist. Not acting on every impulse, but acknowledging it. Not becoming the shadow, but reclaiming its power. The rage you suppress can become your boundary. The desire you shame can become your passion. The fear you deny can become your wisdom. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is psychological alchemy. You are not here to destroy the enemy. You are here to realize that the enemy is the key. Everything you seek, confidence, clarity, peace, lies on the other side of the inner wall you have built. And that wall is made of the parts of you you've locked away. When you begin to tear it down, brick by brick, something incredible happens. The enemy begins to change shape. It stops attacking and starts revealing. It becomes less of a saboteur and more of a guide. You begin to feel whole again, not because you've perfected yourself, but because you've welcomed yourself home. Do not be afraid of your own depth. Do not fear the voice that trembles when it speaks truth. Do not run from the ache that won't go away. These are not signs of weakness, they are signs of awakening. The real war was never between you and the world. It has always been within. And the real victory is not dominance. It is reunion, the return of what was lost, the healing of what was broken, the acceptance of what was denied. This is the truth about your inner enemy. It was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to bring you back. How to escape the prison of your ego. The ego is a clever architect. It builds walls so high, you forget there was ever a world beyond them. It tells you who you are, what to fear, what to desire. It shapes your voice, your posture, your reflection, and for a while, it feels safe. The ego gives you identity, purpose, control. But what it never tells you is the price that in exchange for certainty, you must trade your truth. That behind the fortress of persona lies the prisoner of your deeper self. Mute, watching, waiting. You wear the mask long enough and you forget. It is a mask. You play the role long enough and you forget you were ever the writer. The prison of the ego is not made of steel. It is made of stories. Stories you were told, stories you believed, stories you repeated so often they became your name. Carl Jung saw the ego not as the enemy, but as the beginning, a necessary structure, a container for consciousness. But not the goal. The ego is the skin we grow, so we do not bleed in the world. But to stay in the ego is to mistake the skin for the soul. Most people never escape this prison because the walls are invisible. They are built from praise, from status, from being right. They are fortified by fear, fear of judgment, of rejection, of annihilation. So we defend the mask even when it suffocates us. We polish the bars of our cage, calling it confidence, calling it success, calling it who we are. But deep down, we know something is missing. A silence beneath the noise, a truth beneath the armor. You feel it in the quiet moments when the applause fades, when the distractions lose their flavor, when you are left alone with your thoughts. There is a voice there that is not the ego's. a presence that does not rise and fall with your image. This is the self, not the self you invented, but the one you forgot, the one that existed before the world told you who to be. The self does not speak in the language of ego. It speaks in symbols, in synchronicity, in dreams. It appears when the ego cracks during heartbreak, failure, silence, awe. In those moments, something ancient stirs, a longing not for power, but for presence, not for recognition, but for remembrance. To escape the prison of your ego, you must first realize you are in one. And that realization is painful, because it means grieving who you thought you were. It means watching your false identity fall apart, not to destroy you, but to reveal you. This is the death Jung called necessary, the symbolic death, the death of illusion, the death of the inflated ego, so that the self can emerge. This death is not a one-time event. It is a process, a descent. The alchemists called it the nigredo, the blackening, the stage where everything familiar dissolves into chaos. You may feel lost, you may feel broken, but this darkness is not your end, it is your initiation. The ego fears this descent because it cannot control it. It cannot predict what you will find in the depths. It tells you to stay busy, stay productive, stay visible. But the soul calls you inward, downward, into the forgotten rooms of your psyche, into the dreams you dismissed, into the feelings you numbed. You will find things there the ego never wanted you to see. The shadow, the unlived life, the truth. And if you stay long enough, if you listen closely, you begin to hear a new voice. Not loud, not demanding, but steady. And in that voice is the blueprint for escape. You do not escape the ego by fighting it. You escape it by seeing through it, by realizing that you are not the mask. You are not the fear. You are not even the voice that narrates your life. You are the awareness behind all of it. You are the space in which the ego arises and falls. When you observe your thoughts without identifying with them, the grip loosens. When you allow your emotions without judging them, the bars bend. When you stop reacting and start reflecting, you find the key. The ego cannot survive in true presence, because presence does not need validation. It just is. This is the path of individuation. The journey from ego to self, from fragmentation to wholeness. It is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before the fear. It is about unlearning, unraveling, undoing. The ego wants to build, the self wants to integrate. And the great paradox is this: only by going inward can you truly move forward. Only by surrendering the mask can you claim your true face. The world may not recognize you. That is okay. You were not made to be understood. You were made to be whole. The escape is not glamorous. It is not loud. It is not immediate. It is slow. Humbling, sacred. You will lose people. You will lose status. You will lose the comfort of pretending. But you will find your center. You will find your integrity. You will find a stillness that cannot be touched by praise or criticism. A knowing that does not need to be proven. This is what the ego can never offer. It can only chase, but the self does not chase. It calls, think, and once you hear that call, nothing else will satisfy you. So if you feel the walls closing in, if you feel the ache of falseness, the heaviness of performance, do not run, do not numb. Go deeper. The prison is not a punishment, it is a prompt. It is the soul saying there is more, and there is more truth, more freedom, more you. The real you, the one who does not need to prove, defend, or hide, the one who remembers, the one who watches quietly from within. That is the one who will walk you out of this cage, not by force, but by presence. One breath at a time. The self is calling, will you answer? There is a voice inside you that you have tried to silence. It does not shout, it does not argue, it does not demand your attention. But it never stops calling in the quiet between distractions, in the moments when the roles you play fall away. It returns softly, steadily, unshaken by your resistance. The voice of the self is not like the voice of the ego. It does not promise success. It does not seek applause. It asks for truth. It calls you not to become more, but to remember what you are beneath the noise. The self does not want your perfection. It wants your presence, your wholeness, your willingness to descend into yourself, to face the sacred fire of inner transformation, and to rise not as someone new, but as someone real. Carl Jung knew that this call from the self is the most important summons you will ever receive. It is not dramatic. It does not come with trumpets or visions. It comes with a whisper in the dark, a recurring dream, a discomfort you can't explain. It comes when the life you've built no longer fits the soul you've become. It arrives when every achievement leaves you emptier, when every identity you've crafted starts to feel like a lie. This call is not a punishment. It is a reminder. A reminder that you were never meant to live on the surface. That your essence is not in what you do, but in who you are willing to become. The journey begins when you stop running. When you turn toward the ache you've spent years trying to numb. When you dare to face the shadow. Not the monster you fear, but the parts of yourself you've abandoned. The call of the self always leads through the unconscious, because that is where the lost pieces wait. The dreams you forgot, the desires you dismissed, the truths you were too afraid to speak. The unconscious is not a threat. It is a map. But to read that map, you must learn its language. It does not speak in words. It speaks in symbols, in myth, in emotion, in image. This is the language of the soul. You dream of drowning, of being chased, of standing at the edge of a vast unknown. You wake up unsettled, unsure. But the self is speaking. The dream is not meant to terrify. It is meant to teach every falling elevator. Every locked room, every flood of water is a message encoded in metaphor. These are invitations to descend into yourself, to reclaim the parts that the world told you to hide. You are not just one person, you are a multitude. The persona is only the front stage. Behind it lives the shadow, the anima or animus, the inner child, the inner sage, the wounded warrior, the divine self. These are not just fantasies. They are archetypes, living energies of the psyche, and the self is their center. It is the axis upon which all opposites spin. To answer the call of the self is to walk into the unknown, to step off the path of conformity and into the wild territory of soul. You will not be given a map. You will not be handed clear instructions. What you will receive is a mirror. And in that mirror, you will see all that you are and all that you are not. You will face your rage, your grief, your longing. You will face the lies you've told to feel safe, the personas you've worn to feel worthy. But if you can stay with it, if you can resist the urge to turn back, you will begin to feel something shift. The call will no longer feel like a burden. It will feel like a return. And this is what the ancients called initiation, the death of the false self, the descent into the underworld, the resurrection of the soul. It is the oldest story in the world, the myth of the hero not as a conqueror, but as one who is conquered by truth. One who falls is broken and rises not with power, but with wisdom. The modern world has forgotten this path. It tells us to seek more, do more, win more. But the self does not care about your trophies. It cares about your truth, and your truth lies in the places you avoid, in the emotions you repress, in the questions you are too afraid to ask. Who am I without the mask? Who am I beneath the name, the job, the role? Who am I when no one is watching? These are not philosophical riddles. They are keys, and they unlock the door to the self. Jung called this process individuation, the unfolding of the unique soul through the integration of opposites. It is not about transcending your humanity. It is about embracing it, embracing the light and the dark, the sacred and the profane, the known and the unknowable. Only when you hold both can you stand at the center, and only from the center can the self emerge. The self is not static. It is not a fixed identity. It is a process, a becoming, a flame that burns through every illusion until only essence remains. When you answer its call, you do not become perfect, you become whole. And wholeness is not peace without conflict. It is presence within the chaos. It is the eye of the storm. It is the stillness at the core of the soul. When you find that stillness, you realize something profound, and you were never truly lost. You were only asleep, dreaming someone else's dream. And now you are waking up. Waking up is not easy. It requires sacrifice. You must let go of who you were taught to be. You must risk being misunderstood. You must face the void, the place where everything familiar dissolves. But it is in that void that you will meet yourself, not the self you show the world. The self that has been watching all along, waiting, not with judgment, but with love, not with condemnation, but with clarity. When you meet that self, you will understand why the call came. You will see that every failure was a redirection, every loss was a clearing, every shadow was a teacher. The self does not abandon, it transforms. So now you are being called, not by accident, not by chance, but because something within you is ready. Ready to shed, ready to see, ready to remember. The self is calling, and beneath the noise, beneath the doubt, beneath the fear, you already know the answer. You are not who you think you are. You are not who you think you are. What you call you is a mask stitched together from memories, expectations, traumas, and borrowed desires. It is a reflection, not a reality, an echo of what the world has demanded you to be. From the moment you first heard your name, you were taught to build an identity brick by brick, layer by layer. Be good, be smart, be strong, be liked. And so, without knowing it, you began to abandon the parts of you that didn't fit. You buried your wildness, your grief, your anger, your wonder. You dimmed your light so others would not be blinded by it. And in its place, you built a persona, acceptable, predictable, safe. But the soul does not want safe. It wants truth. And the truth is this: you are more than the story you've been told, more than your name, more than your image, more than your roles. Carl Jung saw the persona as necessary, but never complete. It is the face we wear in society, a mask that allows us to function in the world. But when we believe the mask is all we are, we become hollow. The soul starves beneath the weight of performance, and the self, your true center, begins to fade into shadow. You feel it in moments you can't explain, a sudden wave of sadness, a hunger you can't name. A voice in your chest whispering, "This isn't me." But you keep smiling, keep striving, keep pretending, because you were taught that your worth is in how well you play the part. But what if the part was never meant for you? What if you are not here to perform, but to awaken? What if the self you think you are is just the surface? And beneath it lives an entire universe, untouched, unseen, waiting. The unconscious is not a landfill of suppressed emotions. It is a treasure vault, a place where the forgotten pieces of your soul still breathe. The shadow, the inner child, the archetypes, the unlived life, they are not gone. They are exiled. And now they are calling you back. Dreams are the language of that deeper self. Night after night, your unconscious sends you stories and metaphor. You dream of drowning because you are overwhelmed. You dream of flying because your soul longs to escape. You dream of a stranger because there are parts of you still unknown. These are not fantasies. They are invitations. Every symbol is a thread, leading you inward. Follow them, and you begin to unravel the illusion, and you begin to see that the self you have clung to is not who you are, but who you became to survive. The anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine, are also within you, not as genders, but as energies. The anima is your feeling, your intuition, your capacity to connect. The animus is your clarity, your will, your inner strength. When one dominates and the other is suppressed, we become fragmented. The woman who rejects her animus fears her own power. The man who rejects his anima fears his own vulnerability. But when they are integrated, a third thing is born: the self. The wholeness beyond polarity, the union of opposites. This is not psychological theory. It is inner alchemy. To know the self, you must descend into the unconscious, into the darkness, into everything you have avoided. The hero's journey is not upward, but inward, down into the cave where the dragon guards the treasure. And that dragon is your shadow. All the feelings you were told not to feel. All the truths you were told not to speak. All the instincts you were told to repress. The dragon is not there to destroy you. It is there to test you. Will you turn away, or will you walk through the fire? The treasure is not gold. It is your own soul waiting to be reclaimed. You are not who you think you are. You are who you are willing to become. You are not the mask. You are the one beneath the mask. The watcher, the witness. The silent presence that never left you, even when you left yourself. This is the self, not the ego's projection, but the soul's truth. The self is not concerned with status image or validation. It is concerned only with wholeness, with integration, with remembering. And when you touch it, even for a moment, everything changes. You begin to live from the inside out. You begin to act not from fear, but from alignment. You begin to speak not to impress, but to express. You begin to move, not to be seen, but because it is true. This is the journey Jung called individuation. It is not a straight path. It twists, it breaks, it humbles. But each step takes you closer to yourself, not the self you show the world. The self that watches from behind your eyes, the self that speaks in silence. The self that cannot be taught, only remembered. You are not the role, you are not the name. You are the consciousness behind them. And the more you release who you thought you had to be, the more space you make for who you truly are. So the question is not, who am I, but what am I hiding from myself? What have I feared to see? What have I locked away in the name of being loved? Because until you face that, until you reclaim what you've denied, you will remain trapped in the illusion, living a life that fits but doesn't feel, achieving but not arriving, speaking but not being heard. You don't need to add more. You need to uncover. You need to listen. You need to remember. The self is not far away. It is not a destination. It is right here underneath the performance. It is the part of you that was never broken, never lost, never ashamed. It is the child before the world got to them. It is the dreamer before the world taught them to settle. And it is still alive, buried, yes, but breathing. And every time you turn inward, every time you choose truth over comfort, every time you embrace a part of you that once felt unworthy, you come closer. You become less of what you were told to be and more of who you actually are. That is the real work, and it begins now in this breath, in this moment, as you finally ask the only question that has ever truly mattered. If I am not who I think I am, who am I willing to become? The mask you wear is killing you. The mask you wear is killing you, not all at once. Not with knives or poison, but slowly, subtly, with smiles that aren't real, with laughter that hides the ache, with words that betray what your soul is screaming to say. Every day a piece of you is traded away. Not for survival, but for approval. And it works, doesn't it? You are accepted, praise seen, but not for who you are, for who you pretend to be. The mask smiles while the soul starves. And the deeper tragedy, you've worn it so long, you've begun to forget if there was ever a face beneath it. But the self does not forget. It waits in the silence between performances, in the solitude after the applause. It waits in your insomnia, in your restlessness, in the feeling that something isn't right, even when everything looks perfect. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the social self shaped by expectation, culture, and necessity. We all need it. It allows us to move through the world, to connect, to communicate. But the persona is a tool, not a truth. And when the tool becomes the master, the soul begins to fracture. You wake up every day and step into a character. You adjust your voice, your posture, your opinions just enough to stay inside the script. And the more you perform, the more you are rewarded. So you keep doing it until one day you don't know where the act ends and you begin. But beneath the mask is the shadow. Everything you denied to maintain the image. The anger that wasn't allowed, the sadness that was mocked, the fear you were told to hide, the dreams you gave up because they didn't make sense to anyone else. These are not dead parts of you. They are buried alive, and anything buried alive will eventually claw its way to the surface. Through anxiety, through breakdowns, through the aching emptiness that no success can fill. The persona is efficient, but it is not nourishing. It protects, but it cannot love, because love requires presence. And the mask cannot be fully present. It's too busy being acceptable. There is a moment in every soul's life when the mask begins to crack. It doesn't happen loudly. It happens in the quiet. In the moment you look in the mirror and feel like a stranger. In the moment you succeed and still feel empty. In the moment someone says, "I love you," and a part of you wants to scream. But you don't know me. That's when the mask starts to suffocate. That's when the self begins to stir. And what comes next is terrifying, because it requires everything. It requires you to take it off. You cannot meet the self while pretending. The self does not speak the language of performance. It speaks in symbols and silence, in dreams. It waits in the dark, in the places you've been taught to avoid. The descent into the unconscious is not a path for the faint-hearted. It requires courage, because when you remove the mask, the first thing you will face is everything it was hiding: the grief, the rage, the unmet needs, the voices you silence to keep the peace. They do not come to harm you. They come to be heard. And if you can face them not with judgment, but with compassion, you begin to integrate. This is the process of individuation, the sacred journey from persona to self, from fragmentation to wholeness. It is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before the mask. The self is not created. It is uncovered, like a sculpture hidden beneath layers of dust. You chip away at what is false, and what remains is truth. raw, wild, sacred, and in that truth you begin to breathe again. But make no mistake, there will be loss. You will lose people who love the mask. You will lose comfort. You will lose the illusion of control. But what you gain will be worth it. You will gain your voice, your fire, your presence. You will look in the mirror and finally recognize the one staring back, not because they are perfect, but because they are real. Realness is what the world is starving for. Not more perfection, not more performance, but presence. People who have faced themselves and survived. People who can hold space for truth because they have stopped lying to themselves. Jung wrote that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off the dark, but by integrating it. The mask divides, the self unifies. When you answer the call inward, the shadow stops being a threat and becomes a guide. The wounds become wisdom, the chaos becomes clarity, and the pain becomes power. This is not metaphor. This is alchemy. You are the crucible. Your life is the fire, and your truth is the gold waiting to be revealed. So take off the mask, even if your hands shake, even if your voice trembles, even if your entire identity feels like it's collapsing, because maybe it needs to. Maybe the life you built wasn't built for you. Maybe the version of you that everyone loves isn't the one who needs love the most. Maybe the real you, the one you locked away, has been waiting for this moment all along. And maybe this unraveling is the beginning. The beginning of coming home to yourself. You are not here to be approved of. You are here to be awake, to be whole, to be free. And that begins the moment you stop asking, who do they want me to be? And start asking, who am I when I am alone, unmasked, unedited, true? The answer to that question will not come from others. It will not come from success. It will come from silence, from listening, from daring to exist without performance. And when you do, when you meet yourself beneath the roles and the masks, you will feel something you haven't felt in years. Your soul exhale. That is the moment everything changes. That is the moment you begin to live. Not as a projection, but as a presence. Not as a character, but as a consciousness. That is the moment you remember who you are. And the mask, let it fall, let it break. Let it become the dust from which you rise. Because the truth is, the mask was never keeping you safe. It was keeping you small, and you were never meant to live small. You were meant to burn. How to confront the darkness within. There is a darkness inside you. Not evil, not wrong, but ancient, sacred. Untouched by the masks you wear or the roles you play. It waits beneath the surface, not as a threat, but as truth, the truth of your rage, your sorrow, your hunger, your silence. The truth you've been taught to fear. You were never taught how to face this darkness, only how to run from it, bury it, numb it, medicate it with distractions, with praise, with endless striving. But it doesn't go away, because it is not the enemy. It is the part of you that remembers what you've forgotten. And until you turn toward it, your life will always feel like an echo. Like something is missing even when everything looks full. Carl Jung called it the shadow. Not because it is evil, but because it is unseen. It is everything we hide in order to be accepted. It is the emotions you suppress to appear strong, the desires you deny to be good, the instincts you mute to be civilized. The shadow is not darkness for its own sake. It is unlived life. It is potential waiting in exile. And the longer it is denied, the more it distorts. You begin to project it onto others. You see in them what you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. You resent them, fear them, idolize them. Because deep down you know that what you see is a reflection. To confront the darkness within is not to battle a demon. It is to recognize a part of your own soul that has been locked away. And when you first face it, it will not be pretty. It will not be poetic. It will be raw, uncomfortable. You may cry, you may rage, you may want to run, but stay. Because beneath the chaos is clarity. Beneath the pain is power. What you've called weakness may actually be your depth. What you've called failure may be your honesty. What you feared may be the gateway to your freedom. This descent into darkness is the beginning of every myth. Every hero, every god, every seeker goes down before they rise. They descend into the underworld, into the cave, into the belly of the beast. Why? Because the treasure is always guarded by the shadow, and that treasure is the self. Not the self you perform. The self that is whole, untouched, eternal. But the path there requires the death of illusion, the death of who you thought you had to be. This is the sacred burn, the psychological crucifixion, the undoing that makes space for becoming. The unconscious does not care about your comfort. It cares about your truth. And when it is time, it will speak through your dreams. Your triggers, your patterns, will pull you into relationships that mirror your wounds. It will sabotage what is false, not to punish, but to purify. Every breakdown is a breakthrough in disguise. Every anxiety is a buried voice trying to speak. Every fear is a doorway, but you have to knock. You have to enter. And when you do, you will meet not only the shadow, but the archetypes that live within you. The inner child who still believes they are unworthy. The inner tyrant who demands perfection. The inner lover who aches to be touched. The inner sage who waits patiently with the truth. These are not figments of imagination. They are energies, facets of psyche. They shape your decisions, your reactions, your worldview. And when you meet them consciously, you begin to integrate. You begin to lead from the self, not from the fragments. Integration is not about fixing, it is about witnessing, allowing, embracing. You hold your grief without drowning in it. You allow your anger without becoming it. You welcome your fear without obeying it. And in doing so, you reclaim your power. Not the power to control, but the power to be fully, authentically, unapologetically. This is the power of the whole human being, the one who has walked through their own fire and come out gold. The darkness within you is not a flaw. It is a forge. And you are not broken. You are becoming. Every shadow you confront is a step toward the center. Every emotion you feel is a thread back to the soul. You are not meant to live on the surface. You are meant to descend, to dig, to discover. You are meant to walk through your own underworld and find the diamond buried in the dirt. The diamond is yourself. It is the part of you that never needed approval, that never needed to perform, that never doubted its own light. To confront the darkness is to reclaim your birthright, to become rooted, real free. Not because you have no fear, but because you are no longer ruled by it. Not because you have no pain, but because you have learned how to sit with it. Not because you have no shadow, but because you have stopped pretending you are only light. This is not weakness, this is mastery. The kind that cannot be taught, only lived. And so if the darkness is rising within you, let it. Do not run. Do not numb. Do not turn away. Sit with it. Ask what it has come to show you. Listen not with your ears, but with your soul. You may be surprised by what you hear. You may find that the part of you you feared the most is actually the part that loves you the deepest, because the shadow is not your enemy. It is the guardian of your wholeness, and once you face it, the darkness becomes the doorway. The descent becomes the return, and the self long buried begins to rise.